throughout our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
This is Revelation chapter 13 and verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rokah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Aquath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. I want to go into a lesson based on the clip that you just saw from Augustine, all right, who is an official over the Bank of International Settlements. All right, and that bank is known as the central bank of central banks. All right, as a matter of fact, real quick, this is just AI overview. It says Bank of International Settlements. It says the Bank for International Settlements is an international financial institution which is owned by member central banks. Its primary goal is to foster international monetary and financial cooperation while serving as a bank for central banks. All right, so his statement about having control and using these digital currencies, all right, is not from a position of low rank. You know, he is basically over the bank that is over all the central banks. All right, because when you deal with how the central banking system works, just a really simplified way to look at it is that the central bank in America, for example, is owned by other local banks. All right, other major banks. You know, you think of Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase. All right, these are owners of the central bank. They're all members of the central bank, and they act as agents. Well, if you zoom out, the Bank of International Settlements is basically the central bank for all of the central banks across the countries. All right, so they all report basically to this bank, and this bank handles those transactions between these countries. All right, so it's a very important position. All right, and I want to go into an article that goes into this as well, because again, this is a system. All right, when the scriptures were talking about a mark being implemented, that you may not buy or sell save he that had the mark. All right, it's talking about this new global financial system, you know, and all the bankers, all the economists know that the system had to be reset at a certain point. All right, and this is a controlled demolition so that they can introduce this digital form of currency. You know, they did a bait and switch where they had people look at Bitcoin as an escape from the financial system, but really it was a precursor. All right, so let's go into this. It says the imminent restructuring of the monetary policy of the monetary system. All right, and this is from March 21st, 2025. All right, so since this article has been released, you now have the Genius Act with Trump and the introduction of stable coins, which is basically a cryptocurrency or a digital currency backed by a dollar. All right. You know, if you think about the petrodollar and how the dollar was backed by oil, this is basically another form of trying to prop up the dollar. All right, trying to give the dollar validity through the digital system. All right, now let's continue. It says a controlled unwind and a new Bretton Woods with Bitcoin. All right, and that's why I mentioned that, because Zero Hedge is coming from the perspective of they're going to use Bitcoin for this system, but they're not. Bitcoin was the bait. All right, when you look at how they're structuring it, Bitcoin is kind of like digital gold, whereas stable coins will be something that people will use every day. That's the intention. All right, continuing, it says, for over a century, the global financial system has been increasingly built on papered, over-leveraged, fiat expansion, and financial engineering. Since 1913, governments, financial institutions, and central banks have systemically distorted money and markets, creating an unsustainable system of derivatives, credit expansion, and hidden leverage. That's the state of the system today. It says, we are witnessing the tough decisions required to begin a great unwind, a shift back to sound money, a purge of systemic leverage, and the restructuring of the monetary order. If controlled, this transition will be painful but orderly. If not, we risk a chaotic collapse akin to 1929 or 2008. All right, now remember, this is written in March because a lot of people who backed the crypto idea, they backed it because they believed there was going to be an escape from the current system. All right, and it wasn't an escape. It was bait. It was a quick bait and switch. It was a very cunningly devised agenda to bring people into the crypto market, to bring people into the cashless society market, all right, and then to regulate it. And that's what you see happening with the Genius Act. The Genius Act is a effort to regulate the cryptocurrency space, beginning with stable coins. All right, and the difference between a stable coin and something like Bitcoin is you don't have to worry about the value fluctuating. This is why they akin Bitcoin to digital gold, because the value of gold may fluctuate depending on the currency, depending on the markets. The value of gold may fluctuate. Genius Act and the stable coins is a effort to enter the dollar in as a trusted, reliable source for digital currency. So you can use a stable coin, but it's backed by dollars. And this is, again, going back to prophecy. All right, because ultimately this digital system, if you don't participate, all right, if you don't sign up, if you don't enlist, you won't be able to participate in day-to-day life. That's why when it goes into Revelation 13 and 15, it says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. All right. Now that could mean physically killed, but it also goes into a separation. All right. As a matter of fact, real quick, just for edification's sake, so you can see it. All right. If we go to that word for killed in the Greek, it's a pakteno. All right. It says to kill in any way, whatever. Now, when you go into the root, it says of separation. So they're creating a system where if you don't participate, you are separated. You won't be able to buy or sell. This is how we know this is obviously not talking about an embargo act. This is talking about something completely different, a new digital system where they can monitor every transaction, where everything is centralized. Because when you deal with Augustine and his statement about CBDC, of course, he's going to say that because he's over the central banks. So their wet dream is to have a central bank currency that'll spread globally. You know, but when you deal with what's happening in the system, they're all pointing towards an effort to have digital control through a digital monetary system where they can monitor every transaction. And that's what Augustine mentioned. You know, we don't know who's spending what in what place, whether it's pesos or dollars. So the best way is to have a digital system. All right. And this is what's happening. This is what's happening while people are going on about their life, eating and drinking and marrying. There's a effort to push this whole system into something completely new. And as they say peace and safety, really what they're trying to do, all right, is control. All right. Matter of fact, let's go here. This is 1 Thessalonians 5:2. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. And see, if everything enters this digital realm, if you speak against the system, all right, you can be removed, and there's no way for you to really speak out. If you think about it, every platform that is used to speak out about what's going on, current events, is really owned by some private company. This is why YouTube can take your videos down, even though you have so-called freedom of speech, because they're a private company. They don't have to exist under the rules of the Constitution. Meaning that if they deem your statements undesirable, they can remove it. Now, if you add the money system to this whole equation, they could turn off your money and you can scream and kick, but nobody will ever notice because the major platforms will censor it. Going into the famine of the word. Everything is moving into this digital system. And while they're painting it as convenience, all right, as gradualism, as progression, really it's a means of control. Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, beginning with their elites, are attempting to hijack the blessing that was given to Jacob through the digital medium. Because if everything is under a digital medium and you have AI, which can aggregate and look through all the data within seconds, you can now rule the world as a god through the digital arena. And that's what the push is to do. And this is why even now on your day-to-day basis, you don't use cash as often. That's intentional. All right, real quick, let's go to 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Because it's not just about the money. All right. Remember, the money is just a medium for your resources. You have to go to your enemies for the one of all things. The money is just the medium. It's the bridge. But if they control that, they basically control you. And it's not enough for them to control people through fiat currency. Now they're going to move the fiat currency to a digital medium. And that gives them damn near absolute control. Because if everything is in digital systems and you have digital money and that's the only way you can spend, it's checkmate pretty much. And this is the effort. This is where everything is moving toward. And while these people who thought that they were getting above the system by going to the crypto medium, they didn't realize that this was a very cunningly devised agenda to get people in, all right, and then to regulate it. When you deal with SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, all right, and you look at the scandal, that's one of it's one of the major news articles that kind of came out about crypto deception and crypto theft. That was intentional. Because what's going to happen is pressure from above, pressure from below. They're going to say, look, people are getting scammed. We need an alternative so that crypto and these digital currencies can be monitored and people can play fair. And then they're going to move into the space. They're going to regulate the space. And then they're going to require everybody to fall under that space so that no man can buy or sell except he that has the mark. And you add the monetary system going digital with everything else that's already digital. Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, beginning with their elites, can now control everybody through digital means. This is why even so-called white people are starting to rise up against this system and speak out against it, because they recognize that even they have been made a prey with this agenda. All right, real quick. This is Psalm 64. And I'm going to jump down to verse 8. It says, so they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Because again, the elites of this system, they don't care at this point. It used to be about so-called white privilege, meaning they would give the average so-called white person the privilege of being better than minorities. At this point, the greed has now turned into the house of Edom. All right. And as the scriptures say, a house divided against itself cannot stand. All right. And that's why the scriptures talk about sedition. All right. When you deal with the Egyptians against the Egyptians in Isaiah, the 19th chapter. Why? Because at this point, the so-called white privilege that was being allowed by the elites of the so-called white man is now being taken away as he pours everybody into the pot. This is what you call classism. All right. It's Matthew 12 and 26. If Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? And that system worked for a moment. All right. It allowed the average so-called white person to still be in a lower state, but to feel like they're better than everybody else. And now what the elites are doing is they're putting everybody in the food chain. And this is a controlled demolition. All right, there is going to be a certain type of fall of this economy in order for them to put enough pressure on people to submit to the system that they're about to introduce. And this is why they're presenting it as progress, as they're just doing little subtle signs in movies and TV shows and certain news articles, painting this as natural progression. But really, this is an effort for control. The elites of this world have no good intentions for the average person in this society, so-called white or so-called black. At this point, anybody can get it. And this is why you see this system being designed the way it's designed. And you're seeing so-called white people begin to speak up against the system as well, because they're now becoming victims to their own greed, man. All right. And it's beautiful, right? Real quick, this is Galatians chapter 6. And I'm going to jump down to verse 7. All right, Galatians 6 and 7 reads, "Be not deceived, Yahweh Shem Yahushua is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." All right, so what they've sown across the planet, they're now reaping. You know, they've sown rape, robbery, and murder, and it was okay as long as the average so-called white person was able to benefit from it. But now they're being made a prey. All right. And we covered something similar to this on the Highways and Hedges on Saturday, where you had an average Edomite. All right, what we perceive to be an Edomite, he could be a Jake, but he was basically saying that he don't have white privilege anymore, and whatever the case may be. But that's a product of your own elite's greed. They didn't have a problem with it being minorities that were suffering under this type of system. But now they're being made a prey, and they don't like how it feels. And this is going to bring about sedition, man. All right, let's get that scripture real quick. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 15 and 14. "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword of their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." And it's going to make January 6th look like recess, man. Because that was all about their candidate not being allowed into office. Imagine what they're going to do when they realize that they're being cut out of whatever privilege they thought they deserved. When it's a means of survival. All of these ones that go to the gun range and they buy tactical gear and they go to airsoft and they train, they're going to utilize those skills that they've accumulated out of desperation. And it's because they're being robbed by their own. And that's why it's beautiful, because if you don't understand prophecy, you won't understand the world you live in today, because the average Negro, Latino, or Native American will see the world and be like, well, the so-called white man's suffering too. So how is it racism? It's classism on top of it. Because they still look down on you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. But now the elites have turned their scope onto everybody. Nobody's going to be spared except the ones who are juiced in. And that's where everything is being pushed toward. But in order for that to actually be made manifest, they have to get control of the monetary system through the digital medium. And that's going to bring about that hour of temptation. All right, as a matter of fact, I'll end it with this. It's Revelation chapter 3 and verse 10. "Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown." So it's going to try the whole world, because if you don't participate in the system, you won't have access to your necessities. You won't be able to have transactions. You won't be able to pay bills if you don't take it. And as far-fetched as it seems right now, there was a time where people thought that chips being in cards was far-fetched. That being able to pay with your phone, like using Apple Pay and Google Pay, there was a time where people looked at that as if it was far-fetched. But now here we are. All right, and it's going to continue through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. All right, as a matter of fact, I'm going to get this one as well. This is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 3. "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Hey, so with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rokah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.